Welcome back to Curious Minds, a space where we explore mysteries, history, science, and the ideas that shape how we see the world.
And every episode is a deep dive, grounded in research, storytelling, and curiosity.
Today, we are immersing ourselves in one of the most intriguing and, I think it's fair to say, deeply contested sites in Indian history, the legendary city of Dwarka.
Absolutely, and it's contested for a reason.
And here is the core proposition that really sets the stage for our exploration. Dwarka is not just a story we heard as children. It is a city our scriptures remembered, our coastlines preserved, and our seas slowly revealed. Today, we're looking at Dwarka not as belief versus science, but as memory meeting material evidence. It's a place that forces us to constantly recalibrate our historical timelines.
And what's so fascinating here is that the site itself, Dwarka, holds this immense and enduring weight in the Indian civilizational mind. That's why it has endured as a sacred memory, despite centuries of physical submergence.
Yeah.
This deep dive is customized for you, the learner, because it offers, I think, the shortest route to understanding why this single site poses such a fundamental challenge to the established timelines of Indian history. We're synthesizing literature, marine archaeology, and even recent geopolitical interests.
Okay, let's unpack that civilizational context first, because without understanding its spiritual gravity, the archaeological search loses, half its meaning.
It really does. When we talk about Dwarka, we aren't just discussing a single lost ruin. This is a living, breathing, sacred site, an anchor point for faith across millennia.
It's pivotal, then.
Absolutely. In the Hindu tradition, geography and spirituality are often mapped together. They're intertwined. Dwarka is one of the four chardams, the four abodes of God, which map the sacred space onto the cardinal directions of the entire Indian subcontinent.
It's the Western point.
It's the Western point, exactly. This concept fosters an intense sense of unity and spiritual pilgrimage across all these diverse regions of India. And on top of that, it's also one of the seven holy cities, the Sapta Puris, which confirms its status as a place where liberation or moksha is believed to be attainable.
So that immediately establishes it as more than just some local legend. It's a national sacred anchor, inextricably tied to the nation's spiritual self-image.
Precisely. And its tradition centers on the figure of Lord Krishna. But he's remembered not merely as a divine figure, but specifically as a king, a master strategist, and an immensely sophisticated city builder.
Right. Not just a god, but a ruler.
Yes. The ancient texts describe Krishna as a leader who committed himself fiercely to upholding dharma or righteous conduct. He's both an intensely spiritual guide and a very practical earthly ruler. This is crucial because the memory is of a functioning kingdom, ruled by a pragmatic mind, not just a deity residing in some mythical land.
And this leads us directly to a key difference in the Indian worldview compared to, say, the traditional Western linear view of history.
It does.
Where something is either, proven to have existed, or it's relegated entirely to myth. There's no in-between.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Indian thought naturally accepts cycles of creation and destruction. The idea of time as cyclical, marked by the rise and fall of yugas, or great eras.
So cities and civilizations rise and sink.
They rise and sink with the passing of these yugas. This isn't viewed as a singular, catastrophic event that just ends history. It's a necessary part of a layered, cyclic history where memory persists even when structures physically fail or submerge.
That foundational concept is so crucial.
It is.
Because it means the memory of the city surviving the submergence is already built into the framework of the story itself. The geography remains sacred, regardless of the physical age of the bricks we find.
That's the key. The sanctity of the place endures.
So to understand what archaeologists were even looking for, we have to first study the original blueprint, as detailed in the ancient texts.
The scriptural blueprint, yes.
The city's founding narrative and its eventual form are richly detailed in core texts, like the Mahabharata, the Harivamsa, and the Bhagavata Purana.
And the textual narrative is remarkably specific. It provides both the why, the strategic necessity, and the where, the geographical location. Krishna decides to leave his birthplace, Mathura, because he is troubled by these relentless, repeated attacks by Jarasandha.
Who was the father-in-law of the tyrant Kamsa, whom Krishna had defeated.
Exactly. The sources claim Jarasandha attacked Mathura 17 times.
17 times. That implies a need for a place that was, strategically impregnable. This suggests the sophisticated military mindset behind the founding.
It was a strategic withdrawal and reestablishment, not just a spontaneous choice of location. He sought safety in the sea.
A fortress protected by water.
Precisely. He needed a place protected by the ocean, essentially a water fortress of Varadurga. The sea itself became the chief component of the city's defense. This concept is just integral to understanding Dwarka's location at the extreme western tip of the peninsula.
And the land itself was not taken by force, but was a gift from the elements, correct?
That is the beautiful narrative element. The story goes that Krishna prayed to the sea god, Samudra Dev, who was pleased by his devotion and, his strategic need. Samudra Dev granted him land reclaimed from the sea, specifically 12 yojana of land.
And a yojana it's a variable measurement, right?
It varies, but in some interpretations, this translates roughly to an area of 153.6 square kilometers. I mean, that is a considerable tract of territory for a major city-state.
That numerical detail, the 12 yojana, is important. It gives future excavators a scale to look for. And what's also crucial is that this wasn't virgin land. It was built upon an existing layer of memory.
You hit on a key point of continuity there. Dwarka was constructed on an ancient sacred site called Kusastali, a city that had previously fallen into ruin.
So he was reviving or transforming an existing sacred geography, linking his new city to an already established deep history rather than starting from zero.
Right. And the texts emphasize the incredible speed and skill of the construction. The Harivamsa is especially detailed. It states the city was built by Vishwakarma, the celestial architect.
And this is the incredible part.
It was built mentally in just one day.
Here's where the descriptions sort of bridge that gap between myth and architectural possibility. The descriptions of its grandeur. The Bhagavata Purana gives us those breathtaking, almost fantastical descriptions that paint a picture of unrivaled opulence.
They describe a truly opulent and highly organized city. We hear about the construction of 900,000 royal palaces.
900,000.
Yes, constructed with materials like crystal and silver, decorated with huge emeralds. Now, as our sources wisely note, we should acknowledge this is likely figurative expression.
Right, a literary exaggeration to convey immense prosperity and divine favor.
Of course, not a literal count of palaces.
But if you strip away the emeralds and the silver, the descriptions still point to a highly sophisticated level of urban planning, something that mirrors modern town planning ideals.
Absolutely. The texts detail a meticulously laid out system of boulevards, planned roads, streets that intersect logically, specialized commercial streets, marketplaces.
And defenses.
And deep moats for defense, yes, and assembly houses. The structure of the city was arranged like a chessboard with houses built in lines.
A grid-based layout.
A pre-planned geometric urban core. The Harivamsa calls it squared like a chessboard.
So we move from this glorious founding and prosperity to the inevitable, tragic end, the submergence narrative. And unlike many lost cities, the ancient texts provide a definitive, specific explanation for its demise. It's a combination of internal strife and natural consequence.
The destruction is layered in prophecy and curse. The Mulasala Parva of the Mahabharata describes the ultimate self-destruction of the powerful Yadava clan. It was due to a curse from angry sages, which was then amplified by Gandhari's curse that Krishna's dynasty would be destroyed 36 years after the Kurukshetra War.
This internal decay made the city vulnerable.
Yes, and the critical moment is Krishna's departure from the physical world, which marks the end of an entire era, the onset of the Kali Yuga.
So after his departure,
the remaining residents are evacuated. Arjuna rushes to Dwarka to protect the remaining women and children, and he witnesses the sea rapidly reclaiming the city, swallowing the structures just as the residents leave.
And the key concept here is crucial. Dwarka did not simply collapse.
No, it withdrew.
That distinction, withdrawal versus collapse, is so key to how we interpret the archaeological findings, isn't it? It reframes the whole mission.
It does. Withdrawal, in Indian thought, is seen as preservation, not erasure. The sacred geography and the faith never left the location. The physical structures were simply removed from the physical plane,
which allowed later generations to continuously rebuild on the same sacred spot.
Confirming that the city was not forgotten, only, let's say, momentarily preserved by the sea.
So let's tie this back to the present. What does this mean when we compare Dwarka to other so-called mythical lost cities? Why is Dwarka so distinct from legends like Atlantis or Shambhala?
Because Dwarka is not purely a myth existing only in literature. You can go there. It exists on today's map in Gujarat.
Right, at the western tip of the Saurashtra Peninsula, where the Gomati River meets the Arabian Sea.
A location that perfectly matches the literary descriptions of the very Durga.
And the enduring spiritual geography is still visibly worshipped.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Pilgrims still worship at the Dwarkadesh temple. That structure, in its current form, dates back to the 13th to 15th centuries CE.
But it was built over earlier temples.
Yes, built over earlier temples dating back to the 1st century CE onward. And Dwarka, the island 30 kilometers north, still carries the memory and association of Krishna's daily life. The faith never left the location.
The stage was set by scripture, but the search for material evidence took the story from the temple halls into the ocean. Dwarka holds a unique place in Indian archaeology.
It really does.
It was the first site in India where dedicated marine archaeological exploration began, attracting initial international attention and support, even from UNESCO.
And the physical search began long before the deep-sea expeditions, starting almost a century ago with early onshore discoveries near the existing pilgrimage centers.
Let's start with those. The onshore finds that laid the foundation for the search, spanning the 1930s to the 1970s.
Right. Excavations began near Dwarka Island, the traditional site of Krishna's residence. And in the 1960s, a major figure in Indian archaeology, Hasmukh Sankalia, excavated a trench near the Dwarkatish temple on the mainland.
And what was his conclusion?
His initial conclusion, based on the findings at that time, was, well, skeptical of the epic dating. He placed the foundation of the first Dwarka around the beginning of the Christian era, maybe 200 BCE.
But he found no evidence of deep antiquity.
None, casting doubt on the Mahabharata claims. And Sankalia's skepticism was the prevailing view for decades, which framed the Dwarka story as a site of continuous medieval and historical occupation, but lacking that proto-historic connection.
But the real clue to deep antiquity came later, around 1979 and 1980, with crucial finds beneath the temple complex itself. This is where the narrative starts to shift.
Yes, this was the pivotal moment. Beneath the layers of later temples, which dated from the 13th, 9th, 4th, and 1st centuries, CE archaeologists found highly eroded deposits at about 10 meters deep.
And what was in those deposits?
They included fragments of lustrous redware pottery. This specific pottery is a diagnostic marker.
A marker for what period?
It's associated with a post-Harappan or Chalcolithic period.
So what does that pottery tell us? Why is lustrous redware so significant?
It suggests that a flourishing port town existed there, which was destroyed or abandoned due to the sea's encroachment about 3,500 years ago.
3,500 years ago.
Placing it firmly in the 2nd millennium BCE. This find, the 3,500-year-old lustrous redware, provided the first material evidence that an urban settlement existed at that precise spot on the coastline during the time period vaguely associated with the later Vedic or Puranic accounts.
So that was the material foundation that motivated the move offshore.
And that move led directly to the pioneering Rao expeditions, the work that really put Dwarka back on the international map.
Dr. S.R. Rao of the National Institute of Oceanography.
Exactly. He led the extensive underwater searches between the 1980s and 1990s. His mission was not just curiosity, it was explicitly to bridge the gap between the monumental claims of the epic and any material reality that might exist underwater.
And the scope of his work, he wasn't just looking at the mainland coast.
No, the exploration focused heavily off the mainland, near the mouth of the Gomati River, but it extended north to Dwarka Island as well. Rao and his team claimed to find the ruins of a massive, well-fortified city extending over half a mile from the shore.
Wow.
This included inner and outer fortification walls with a sophisticated gateway complex, an outer one leading to the open sea, and an inner one guiding boats into the Gomati River channel.
That structural find is a colossal claim. It suggests sophisticated engineering and defense that matches the Varaduga description from the texts.
It does. They were constructed with large, dressed stone blocks. Rao identified remnants of a stone jetty, rectangular enclosures, and crucially circular bastions built around corners.
Presumably to protect the city against the force of the sea?
The force of the sea and strong water currents, yes. He used the dating of associated finds at Dwarka and comparative dating of some stone anchors to assert a 1500 BCE timeline for the entire complex.
But the findings weren't limited to the submerged city on the mainland. Dwarka also yielded significant evidence.
The finds at Dwarka were fascinating because they connected this sacred site directly to the Indus Valley tradition.
Suggesting a continuity between the Harappan and later periods.
Precisely. Finds there included fortification walls visible at low tide, late Harappan pottery dated around 1500 BCE by thermoluminescence, and artifacts associated with a trading, seafaring civilization.
Like what kind of artifacts?
Things like Indus-style seals, inscribed jars, and these rock-cut slipway-like features, which were likely used for launching boats.
That is a critical link. Thermoluminescence dating, for those unfamiliar, is a method used on ceramics to determine when they were last fired.
And it essentially confirmed the age of that late Harappan pottery to the mid-2nd millennium BCE. Correct. The presence of Indus-style seals here suggests Dwarka was actively participating in maritime trade, perhaps even after the main Harappan cities had declined.
So if we synthesize Ra's material and his overarching conclusion, what did he believe he had found?
Rao asserted that the available archaeological evidence from both onshore and offshore confirms the existence of a highly sophisticated, fortified city-state dated to 1500 BCE.
And that this was compatible with the text.
Entirely compatible, in his view. He posited that the city-state was an interconnected complex, and that Dwarka was indeed a part of India's second urbanization phase, a significant cultural development often overlooked in standard histories.
Rao's work created headlines globally, but as with any ambitious archaeological dating effort, it immediately faced intense academic scrutiny.
Of course.
So we have later, more detailed data from the Marine Archaeology Center of the NIO, specifically the investigations by A.S. Gower, Sundaresh, and Sila Tripathi between 1997 and 2001.
This later work revisited the structures found opposite the Gomati Creek mouth, in depths up to 6 meters. It focused on comprehensive documentation, and the findings presented a much more complex, layered picture.
So the question became, are we looking at the original stones or structures built centuries later on top of the sacred memory?
That's the core question.
Okay, let's look at the actual structures found at location A near Gomati Creek. What did they find, and how did they interpret it differently?
They found numerous things. Semicircular, rectangular, and square-shaped stone blocks scattered over a massive area, about 225 by 275 meters. So this debris field certainly confirmed that large, structured construction had taken place there.
What were the structures like?
The semicircular structures were often L-shaped blocks with provision for dowels, and significantly, some still contained remnants of cementing material, specifically lime mortar.
Why does the presence of lime mortar matter so much?
Because high-quality systematic lime mortar was not typically a feature of construction in the proposed 1500 BCE period. Its presence is generally indicative of structures from the early Christian era onward, and often points strongly toward later medieval construction in the region.
And the rectangular blocks, which Rao had championed as remnants of the ancient fortification walls.
They were undoubtedly large, dressed stone blocks. However, the Sundaresh team highlighted a major discrepancy by comparing them to other known sites. They found these blocks to be visually and materially similar to those found at Rupan Bundar.
Which is a site nearby.
Yes, and it was definitively identified as a collapsed recent jetty.
So the suggestion is that the visible, organized stone structures found underwater might be the remnants of a medieval harbor complex, maybe from the 14th or 15th century, built right where the old port was known to exist.
That is the alternative hypothesis. They suggested the Dwarka structures might also be pillars or superstructures of a medieval jetty, layered perhaps over older, deeper, and as yet unverified remains.
And there was direct evidence for this later date.
There was. They found a rectangular stone block bearing Gujarati script, which points directly and undeniably to the late medieval period.
This brings us to the most critical factor that undermines the claims of deep, ancient habitation right at that spot: the missing artifacts.
This is the definitive scientific gap. Despite the extensive visual evidence of structures, extensive airlifting near these submerged structures failed to yield the typical, conclusive habitation artifacts you would expect.
Like what?
No pottery, no coins, no seals, unlike at Dwarka, and no daily use items associated with long-term human settlement. The stones were there, but the evidence of daily life was absent in those layers.
So the immediate submerged structures near the creek mouth may be much younger structures, but regardless of the exact date of the stone blocks, the sheer number of stone anchors found confirms one thing beyond doubt.
Right.
Dwarka was an extremely busy major port center throughout the historical era.
That maritime connection is irrefutable.
Yeah.
Over 120 stone anchors of various types were noticed in Dwarka waters, lying between the intertidal zone and 16 meters of water depth.
And these anchors tell a story of evolving trade and technology.
They do. We have the composite type, usually three-holed, made of local limestone.
Yeah.
Then you have the grapnel anchors, which are more significant. They're long, heavy, and made of fine material.
And these are the ones sometimes called Arabic anchors.
Honor Frost termed that, yes, suggesting introduction by skilled Arab traders along the Indian Ocean trade routes. Their size up to 1.5 meters long, weighing 100 to 250 kilograms, suggests they were for larger seafaring vessels.
Which points to long-distance trade.
Exactly. And the third type, the ringstone type, sometimes called Saurashtra anchors, were circular or hemispheric. possibly originating right on the Saurashtra coast, so local innovation too.
And they found some truly monumental examples.
Yes. At one location, they reported one massive triangular stone anchor estimated to weigh nearly 500 kilograms, and two grapnel anchors that were 2.3 meters long. These suggest the presence of truly massive ancient trading vessels.
But anchors, as artifacts, present a huge dating challenge that directly undermines Rao's early claims, which relied heavily on them.
They do, because anchors are notoriously hard to date without associated artifacts like pottery. Rao initially tried to date the site to 1500 BCE by comparing the three-holed triangular anchors to similar late Bronze Age sites in the Mediterranean.
But that comparison didn't hold up.
The newer analysis suggests many of these anchor types, especially the grapnel type, likely date only to the historical period, maybe no earlier than the first millennium BCE, and not later than the 14th century AD. They simply do not establish a 1500 BCE date in the Indian context.
This is where we move past the debate over the specific visible structures and ask the core question. Does the memory embedded in the texts align with any verifiable physical timeline?
Even if the stones we see today are much younger, yes.
So we have three competing date ranges. We have the archaeological claim of 1500 BCE from Rao. We have the alternative view that the visible structures are late medieval. And now we introduce the epic date.
Which is much, much earlier.
Right. But the narrative of the Mahabharata itself can be scientifically dated using celestial mechanics rather than just terrestrial stone blocks. This is the astronomical dating approach.
It's a remarkable piece of literary forensics. The ancient texts, particularly the Udyoga and Bhishma Parvas of the Mahabharata, contain extremely specific astronomical references.
For example,
Professor Narahari Achar used these textual descriptions of the sky. The text details events like eclipses, the precise location of Saturn at the star Aldebaran, and Mars performing a specific retrograde motion near Antares.
those are incredibly specific data points, celestial timestamps.
Exactly. Using astronomy software that can run the sky backwards, researchers ran scenarios across nearly 4,000 years. The computer tells us if you stood on Earth on this specific day, this is exactly what the sky would have looked like.
Allowing you to verify the epic's claims against historical reality.
Correct. They found 137 conjunctions where Saturn was at Aldebaran.
And how did they narrow that down?
By adding the constraint of Mars performing its retrograde motion near Antares, the possibilities were reduced drastically to just 17 potential years. Then, by looking for a lunar eclipse in the specific Hindu month of Kartika, the dates were reduced to two possibilities,
Which were?
2183 BCE and 3067 BCE.
So two viable dates for the war. How is the final date determined?
The clincher was the text's description of the winter solstice. The epic specified that the winter solstice occurred during the waxing phase of the moon, a very specific cyclical condition.
And only one date matched.
Only the earlier date, 3067 BCE, matched that condition, along with the description of an ominous 13-day interval between the lunar and solar eclipses mentioned in the text.
That is a profound finding. A scientific, repeatable dating of the epic itself lends significant credence to the idea that a massive event occurred in the early 4th millennium BCE.
Which is far earlier than Rao's 1500 BCE date, and crucially predates the mature Harappan civilization.
This dramatically shifts the goalposts of Indian history. If a sophisticated, fortified city capable of building on a grid pattern existed in the early 4th millennium BCE, it changes our understanding of when Indian urbanization truly began.
It really does. It pushes the potential Kusastali memory into the earliest proto-historic periods.
Which raises the question, if the epic dates to the early 4th millennium BCE, what kind of destructive event happened then that was so sudden and decisive that the memory of the sea swallowing the city endured?
This is where we turn to geology.
The geological catastrophism data is incredibly compelling because it links the mythological flooding narrative directly to verifiable global sea level rise events.
The National Institute of Oceanography has generated records of sea level fluctuation over the last 15,000 years, showing that sea levels started rising dramatically around 7,000 years ago.
But a slow, gradual rise wouldn't match the Mahabharata description of the sea rapidly claiming the city.
Precisely. That's why we look at external research, like the work of geologists like Paul Blanchon, which points to catastrophic sudden sea level rise events, known as CR events.
Which specific event aligns with the Indian narrative?
The CR3 event, associated with a rapid influx of meltwater from Antarctic ice sheets, is dated globally around 5600 BCE. But crucially, specific Arabian Sea data has been analyzed, It suggests a decisive, sudden sea level rise of approximately 15 meters occurred around 525 BCE in this region.
5525 BCE. Let me connect this back to the epic narrative and the 36-year curse.
Hmm.
The Mahabharata narrative claims Dwarka was flooded 36 years after the Kurukshetra War. If we accept a war date that falls slightly earlier than the astronomical 3067 BCE date, say closer to 55561 BCE, then 36 years later puts us right at 5525 BCE.
Exactly. This suggests a massive sudden natural disaster may have provided the cataclysmic backdrop for the mythology. The flooding narrative is not an exaggeration of slow coastal erosion. It may be an accurate, if poetically described, memory of a sudden catastrophic inundation.
So, to make sure we're grounded, we have literary memory pointing to the 4th millennium BCE, geological evidence supporting an even earlier massive flood event in the 6th millennium BCE.
But the actual stones we can see underwater look medieval or from the early Christian era. That's the tension we need to hold.
It is the central tension of Dwarka.
And the Indian tradition allows for multiple Dwarkas across cycles. It suggests these findings: the 5525 BCE event, the 3067 BCE date, the 1500 BCE pottery, the 1st century BCE temple foundations, and the medieval jetties are not contradictions. They are layers of history built upon the same deeply sacred geography.
The search for India's deep history takes us a few hundred kilometers away to the Gulf of Combat, formerly the Gulf of Cambay, which presented a sensational, though highly controversial, discovery in the early 2000s.
This was entirely serendipitous, discovered not by archaeologists but by oceanographers from the National Institute of Ocean Technology, or NIOT.
And what the sonar scans revealed was far from routine.
Far from it. They found massive, grid-like geometric structures stretching nearly 5 kilometers long by 2 kilometers wide at a depth of 30 to 40 meters. The scale was breathtaking. The images showed remarkably straight lines and 90-degree angles patterns that seemed definitively man-made.
And the location was suggestive of an ancient human settlement.
Highly suggestive. It was situated at the submerged confluence of two ancient river channels, suggesting it was once dry land, perhaps a major riverine settlement during the last ice age period when sea levels were much lower.
Now, because the currents in the Gulf of Combat are so treacherous, divers couldn't be safely sent down initially, so NIOT used mechanical dredging to extract samples.
And this led directly to the deep antiquity claim. The dredged material included worked stone tools, pottery fragments, semi-precious beads, and critically, a heavily fossilized piece of wood.
And the carbon dating results shocked the historical community.
They absolutely did. The wood sample was sent to 2 independent labs, and the results were strikingly consistent. The wood dated back to approximately 7,500 BCE, or roughly 9,500 years before present.
9,500 years old. If confirmed, this metropolis would fundamentally rewrite global history. It would predate Sumer, predate Egypt, and far predate the accepted beginnings of Indian civilization by several millennia.
This led some researchers, notably Dr. Badranarian, to speculate that this was the real Dwarka city, or part of the deep civilizational memory Krishna inherited, the original Kusastale.
But wait, if the combat discovery is genuinely 9,500 years old, why aren't all archaeologists talking about this constantly? This is where the controversy became intense.
That is the essential skeptical question. The intense academic indifference that followed was directly linked to methodological flaws. First, the methodology. Artifacts were recovered only via dredging. You are just scooping up material from the seabed.
Which means stratification analysis is impossible.
It's virtually impossible. Given the strong currents and millennia of nautical traffic, there is a very high risk of collecting errant material that does not correlate with the specific site structure.
So the stone tools and pottery might have been washed there from much younger coastal sites.
Precisely. Which leads to the second critique, the evidence itself. There were no photographic or direct visual records of buildings, only sonar images, which marine geologists argue can be highly subjective. Critically, experts accused the NIOT team of interpreting natural geological features, or geofacts, as human-made artifacts.
What's the difference between a geofact and an artifact in this context?
An artifact is something indisputably shaped by human hands, a carved stone, a tool. A geofact is a natural stone formation shaped by geological forces or erosion. The core dispute is whether the dredging brought up carved stones or just natural seabed rubble.
And the carbon-dated wood.
It was identified as a piece of riverine timber. It was not identifiable as a human-made object like a wooden beam, nor was it found in situ within a structure. It was just a piece of ancient wood found in an area that was once dry land.
So in short, while the deep antiquity claim is spectacular, the evidence is highly contested and still unresolved.
A fascinating possibility, but robust, stratified proof is still desperately needed.
Despite the unresolved controversies, the original Dwarka site, the one associated with Krishna and the Gomati Creek, has seen a major methodical re-engagement in recent years.
After 2 decades of relative silence, the Archaeological Survey of India, the ASI, launched a significant new underwater mission starting in February 2025. This shows a profound institutional commitment to verifying the claims using 21st century tools.
What's motivating this renewed urgency after so much time?
It's multifaceted. It blends heritage acknowledgement with methodical science. The mission aims to systematically reassess the submerged remains using advanced remote sensing, modern mapping, and precise dating tools.
And the timing is significant.
It coincides with a significant national interest across India in revisiting and potentially challenging established, often Eurocentric, timelines of Indian history.
What's different about the 2025 methodology compared to the pioneering expeditions of the 80s?
The focus is methodical and careful, designed to address those past flaws. The current team is focused on surveying near the Gomati Creek, prioritizing the ability to geotag and analyze artifacts in situ,
So they're meticulously documenting them exactly where they are found.
minimizing the problems associated with dredging. The goal is to conclusively verify the context of the older layers that lie beneath the visible medieval stone blocks.
And the site's significance has also moved firmly into the realm of official, high-profile acknowledgement.
That's a key context point. The site received high-profile acknowledgement with the Prime Minister's personal underwater visit and prayer in February 2024.
Which publicly validates the idea that these are not merely geological phenomena.
It reinforces the structure's existence as a powerful, enduring civilizational memory that demands dedicated scientific attention.
And the future vision for Dwarka extends beyond just archaeology, correct?
Yes. Plans include preservation efforts and potentially developing submarine tourism, allowing the public to engage directly with this submerged heritage. It reflects a societal desire to integrate this deep layered history into the public narrative.
So what does this deep dive ultimately teach you, the learner?
It teaches us that history is layered. Indian history, specifically, is not linear. Scripture preserved the location and memory, even when the exact visible structures belong to multiple periods.
So the location remained constant, even if the structures changed?
Exactly. Archaeology isn't in the business of disproving belief. It is often in the business of catching up to narratives that preserved location and memory over millennia,
Faith kept Dwarka alive when the stones were underwater.
forcing science to look deeper and push the boundaries of established historical timelines.
Dwarka reminds us that our ancestors recorded truth in poetry, not blueprints.
And sometimes, the sea returns what time was asked to keep, forcing us to constantly reevaluate the timelines we thought were fixed.
So that's a wrap on today's deep dive.
Thank you so much for spending your time with Curious Minds.
If you found this discussion interesting, feel free to like, comment, and share your thoughts.
And as always, stay curious, stay grounded, and hope to have you join us for the next one.